Be seated. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. You are all welcome to the Senior Executive Course number 47, 2025 Distinguished Annual Lecture. My name is Dr. Tanko David. I will be anchoring this program. From the program with you, we are expected to take some introductions, but before then, it is important to give a little background to the Distinguished Annual Lecture. The Distinguished Annual Lecture signifies the end of the Senior Executive Course at the National Institute. During this lecture, an important personality, eminent in an area of field, is invited to deliver a lecture on a topic which also falls within the mandate of the National Institute towards a better society. Today, we have an important personality in the name of Professor Sam Egu, who is going to deliver a lecture on strengthening democratic governance as a catalyst for sustainable national security. But before I invite him to come over, let me recognize the presence of the Director General, Professor Ayo Motayo, who is here with us. The distinguished speaker, Professor Sam Egu, the resident electoral officer of Benue State. We also have in our midst the acting director of studies, Barrister Salman Man, MNI. Also on this side of the hall is the acting director of research, Professor Musa Emmanuel Umar, MNI. We are also delighted to have the former Director of Research of NIPS, our own, who has always been with us, Professor Dung Pam Shah. The First Lady of the National Institute is also here. Our mother, Mrs. Professor, yes, please. Yes, I don't feel eminent to introduce you, but that's why I made those mistakes. Thank you for coming, ma'am. On the side here, we have members of the faculty, usually following the DG's style manual. We ask you to stand for recognition. If you don't mind, please. Please, a round of applause for members of the faculty. They are the ones who do what is expected of them in the faculty. Please sit down. We also have other invited guests from JOS and the community who are also here. As they come, we shall introduce them accordingly. On this note, may I very kindly invite the Director General to present his welcome address to the floor, please. DG, sir.
Let me start by welcoming all of us formally to the distinguished annual graduation lecture for SEC 47 2025. You are all welcome to this hall. Earlier this morning, the executive governor of Plateau State sent in his apologies. He's unable to be here together with his commissioners, basically because they had earlier committed to attending the graduation of the University of Jos. I understand why that is so. We had shifted our own event several times, and they are unable to just respond at very short notice. Distinguished, my board chairman also has asked that I represent him. He will be here tomorrow for the graduation, and given the logistics of his movement, we decided that rather coming tomorrow with the vice president who will be representing the president for the graduation ceremonies. Distinguished annual guest lecturer, Professor Sam Egu, the president and national officers and members of the Alumni Association of the National Institute here present, management of the National Institute, members of faculty and senior staff of the National Institute, participants of the Senior Executive Course 47 2025, respected invited guests, members of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you all to the 2025 edition of the National Institute's Distinguished Annual Lecture. This annual platform remains one of the most important intellectual traditions of NIPS, designed to stimulate critical national dialogue, deepen policy reflection, and enrich the strategic thinking of our senior leaders. Today's lecture is particularly significant as it coincides with our current national challenges. It provides us with an opportunity not only to reflect on our national trajectory, but also to challenge ourselves to imagine and design a more secure, more prosperous, and more resilient Nigeria. Let me therefore extend my profound appreciation to our guest lecturer, Professor Samuel G. Egu, the resident electoral commissioner of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Benue State. His distinguished scholarship, deep knowledge of democratic governance, and decades of service to our nation makes him eminently qualified to lead today's conversation on the theme, strengthening democratic governance as a catalyst for sustainable national security in Nigeria. This is even more auspicious given the assignment that Mr. President has given the National Institute. This theme could not be more timely at a period when Nigeria continues to navigate complex political, economic, and security challenges. It has become increasingly clear that sustainable national security cannot be achieved through military strength or security expenditure alone. It must be anchored on good governance, credible institutions, civic trust, rule of law, and a participatory democratic culture that gives every citizen a meaningful stake in the Nigerian project. As an institute, we remain committed to ensuring that we continue to fulfill the mandate as the apex policy think tank of the Federation. In the past years, NIBS has deepened its research capacity, strengthened partnerships, expanded policy dialogues, and provided strategic recommendations to government at all levels. The distinguished annual lecture stands as a testament to our continuous investment in knowledge generation, leadership development, and national transformation. To members of the Senior Executive Course 47, I congratulate you. You have spent the past 10 months interrogating national issues, engaging stakeholders, and producing actionable policy ideas. The insights you have generated will enrich governance processes across the country, and we look forward to your continued contribution to nation building. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the management and the governing board, I thank you all for honoring our invitation. I encourage us to engage today's lecture with open minds, critical reflection, and a shared commitment to strengthening our democracy and securing the future of our nation. It is now my honor to formally declare the 2025 Distinguished Annual Lecture open and to invite our guest lecturer to deliver his presentation. I guess we may need to read the citation before we do that. Okay. Thank you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Thank you very much, the Director General. Please, another round of applause for him. At this point, I'll invite my senior colleague, Dr. Solomon Gushibet, to come forward and read the citation of our distinguished guest lecturer, please.
With the kind permission of the Director General of the National Institute, I will now read the abridged citation of our distinguished annual lecturer, Professor Sam Egu. Born on February 7, 1961, Samuel Egu is a professor of political economy in the Department of Political Science, University of Jos, North Central Nigeria. He has spent the better part of his adult life as a scholar, researcher, and teacher since joining the services of the University of Jos in April 1986. Professor Egu received his bachelor honors in political science in the second-class upper division from the Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, in June 1982, and received both the master's and doctoral degrees in political economy and development studies from the University of Jos. Early in his academic career, he won a number of fellowships. These include the West African Research Association, WARA, spent at Northwestern University, Evanston, Chicago, USA, 1995, the Fellowship of the Center for Advanced Social Science, CAS, Port Harcourt, 1966, and the Nordic Africa Institute, Uppsala, Sweden, as guest researcher in 1997. He has published extensively in local and international journals and has published books and over 80 chapters in books. These include the 2 volumes on federalism in Africa, co-edited with the late Professor Aaron Ghana, and Agrarian Change, Structural Adjustment and Rural Ethnicity in Nigeria. Samuel Egu is a member of many professional associations, including membership of the Nigerian Political Science and the African Association of Political Science, and served as president, Nigerian Political Science Association, NPSA, from 2009 to 2011. He has held a number of positions, including team leader, governance and peace building, UNDP, Nigeria Country Office, 2009 to 2014, doubling as governance advisor to the resident representative of the UNDP Nigeria. Support to the coordination of the Joint Donor Basket Fund, JDBF, and the successor project, Democratic Governance Development, DGD, which delivered support to INEC and other stakeholders in Nigeria's electoral democracy, 2009 to 2014. Kogi State Delegate to the 2014 National Conference. He served on the Committee on Devolution of Power. Convener, Citizens Forum for Constitutional Reform, CFCR, consisting of over 100 civil society organizations across the country for impactful advocacy for the reform of the 1999 Constitution. He presently serves as the Resident Electoral Commissioner, REC, of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Benue State, and previously served in this capacity in Niger State from August 2017 to August 2022. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to invite to the podium our distinguished annual lecturer, Professor Sam Egu, an eminent scholar, a respected public intellectual, and a leading voice in governance and development studies. Professor Egu's contributions to national policy discourse and his enduring commitment to strengthening democratic institutions have left an indelible mark on our country. Kindly join me in welcoming Professor Sam Egu to deliver the distinguished annual lecture here at NIPS Kuru. You are welcome to the podium, sir.
Thank you very much for this very generous introduction. The Director General, Professor Omotayo, and the staff in the directorates, and distinguished participants, I envy all of you. It's my hope that one day I will come and be a participant. You know, first of all, let me thank NIPS for inviting me. It's a very big honor. Also, thank you for your podium. This podium suits my height. You know, my colleague Pamsha and I were at an event 2 weeks ago, and the height of the podium became a matter of debate because we are not as lucky as the DG. You know, when I was walking in with him, I created some distance so that it won't become so obvious, the disparity. Thank you, DG. I really thank all of you. And I'm also happy. I came in this morning and ran into people, 2 people particularly. I met Amina Salihu. And I said, Amina, so this is where you have been hiding. But more importantly, I met my friend, Professor Charles Ukeje from Ife. It's over 20 years since I met him last. So seeing him here today was a very big source of happiness for me. I'm happy to reunite with you, Charles. Well, I'm speaking on a very familiar subject, and I think the DG, looking at the welcome address alone, has already summarized what I think are the critical points that I'm going to expand on, namely to see what is it we can do to strengthen democratic governance in order to yield sustainable national security. So we are familiar with the problematic of this lecture, namely that we have seen different kinds of threats. And these threats have direct impacts on development, on democratization, and on nation building. And we are familiar with the kind of threats that we are confronted with on a daily basis. Insurgency groups in some parts of the country, especially in the northeast and the northwest. We have seen farmer-herder conflicts. We have seen rural banditry of all kinds, including cattle rustling. We have seen inter-ethnic conflicts. We have seen youth-dominated ethnic militias. And all of us are worried about the human tragedies that follow or accompany these incidents. But I think, for me, the most obvious of the impact of this is the way they have challenged our sense of common citizenship and nationhood. And often they highlight our fault lines. Sometimes they highlight differences between north-south. That is historic divide. Sometimes it highlights the tension, contradictions, obvious or latent, between Christians and Muslims. Sometimes they pitch ethnic minority groups against ethnic majority groups. In fact, sometimes we begin to wonder whether what is going on is not the unraveling of the artificiality of the nation-state entity called Nigeria. In fact, some people say, well, it will happen. This is an artificial project. The British, I read one book that describes Lord Lugard as the most successful freelance imperialist, conquering from Sokoto to Lagos and putting different ethnicities together. They say it won't work. We have always said so. And yet, the truth is that many successful nations are multi-ethnic and multi-religious. There is nothing to suggest that monolithic ethnic identity conduces to, a national project that has no tension. So we confront the national question in many ways. And in fact, the one that is even surprising me now is that we are being told that contrary to what we knew about Hausa Fulani identity, there is no such a thing like that again. They say Hausa people are different from Fulani. A new construction that tells you about the social distance between two groups that many people in this country saw as forming a common alliance to dominate and oppress others. I think things are happening, and we need to take note of what is going on. So I think that for choosing to come and discuss this, I think the DG is right that this is probably the right moment to do so. But my summary of what is going on is that it tells us our development trajectories and the fact that this country has failed two areas of catastrophic failure: development and nation building. And all you need to do is to look at the data, the statistics. about Nigeria's performance, Human Development Index. Look at the analysis about Fragile State Index. Look at where we sit. The fact that this country has become the poverty capital of the world. These are things that draw your attention to the fact that indirectly we are dealing with the failure of development. We are also dealing with the failure of nation building, because this country is unique in terms of how the ruling elites manipulate differences. It's a political resource for them. It's part of their technology of power. So there's no way, the way we conduct our politics, that you will not have this kind of thing. In fact, I've told people in private discussion that even some of the elements or manifestations that we are dealing with may be linked to the way the political class is playing its game, the type of mobilization they do, the kind of investment they make to make it easy for them to win power, may be part of the problem that we are dealing with. But I think the frustration with the nation-state project and the failure of development needs to be interrogated in terms of what we are going through. So as I noted in my introduction, there's really nothing new about what we are going through. The Nigerian government set up the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. And as far back as 2002, it did a strategic conflict analysis in this country and has repeated and confirmed all the issues that we are discussing. In fact, IPCR did not stop there. They developed what they call a national infrastructure for peace and also a national peace policy, which governments are supposed to adopt and provide enabling legislation. It never happened. Similarly, there are many other groups. The Office of the National Security Advisor has an ongoing project on countering violent extremism and developing a framework for that. All these haven't yielded anything. And I'm also interested in the fact that these cases, these problematic issues have also reached their highest heights at the time this country returned to democracy, making some people to feel that maybe we shouldn't have democracy. Maybe it is the harbinger of all the problem. Yes, in a democracy, politicians do ethnic mobilization. They mobilize religious constituencies, but that cannot explain what is going on. After all, democracy itself has its own framework and institutions for addressing differences. This country is federal. We have a federal constitution. What's happening to that? Apart from democracy, we also have constitutional democracy in place. In this country, we talk about ethnic balancing or the promotion of federal character. All these things are supposed to address problems of differences and help us to build a sense of national identity, but they are not happening. But before I finish my introduction, I simply want to suggest that 3 issues are at play. One is that there is something fundamentally wrong about how we have framed our democracy. Our democracy is liberal democracy in nature. Those who are celebrating this liberal democracy are the international financial institutions, because that is the framework they want to promote market reform. It is not directly about the people's welfare. I'll speak about this. The second point is that we have also wrongly framed national security over a long period. We had misleading ideas that dictated a type of practice that took us away from promoting national security. And of course, the reality of poor democratic governance is something that we cannot run away from. I'll try, within the 45 minutes that I have, after using 5 of the 45, to end my presentation here. So I first of all ask, what is democratic governance? Yes, and the big point I want to make is that democratic governance means something else from governance itself. You can actually have effective governance without democracy, and the literature is very clear. If you go back to the World Bank, that actually promoted and popularized the idea of governance, they didn't have democracy in mind. What they had in mind when they started promoting the idea of governance and good governance is about how to run a clean state, how to run a society devoid of corruption, how you can mobilize and use resources of society in an open and transparent manner, and how you can have voice, particularly of the underprivileged, in the policy process. The World Bank simply defined governance as the manner in which power is exercised in the administration and management of a country's economic and social resources for growth and development. And those who have been persuaded that you can have effective governance without democracy have also concluded that democracy is a luxury, that indeed you can have development. What do you want? Is it not development? You don't need democracy. The truth of the matter is that there are countries that have delivered development without democracy, but their people suffered in terms of their rights, in terms of egregious violations of their rights, in terms of their inability to even criticize and openly make contribution to the way in which they are governed. And in fact, I believe the point that Claude Ake makes very eloquently, namely that as African people, we need democracy. It's not just governance. It's not just authoritarian rule that will deliver social services that we need, because we've gone through, a lot in terms of authoritarian military regimes that abused us, that suppressed us, and also laid the foundation for so many of the things that we came to inherit once we return to democracy. So, democratic governance means subsuming governance to obey the logic of a democratic society. So, we will then talk about a democracy that, is a framework of advocating for good governance. So I think that is the point. So we are dealing with good governance, we are dealing with democratic governance, we are dealing with a functional democracy, and a democracy that is functional is not just the one that does elections every 4 years. It's not the one that brings international and domestic observers to tick the boxes and say, oh, this conforms with free and fair election. A democratic governance goes beyond that. It is one that is amenable to political accountability. It is the one in which election actually serves the role of a promissory note in terms of you choose your leaders, and the power of choosing gives you the opportunity to hold them to account. A functional democracy is one that is also about citizens' participation and inclusion in the policy process. That includes youth, women, disabled, but more importantly, that speaks to issues of the material needs of the population. And I think that's why in the discussion on democracy, you can actually, say there's the procedural form. We have done that one very well. 7 successive elections. The level of credibility of the elections have varied, but nonetheless, there are good stories around our democratic elections. It has enabled peaceful transfer of power from one set of civilian elites to another. In 2015, we even had alternation of power at the national level. And at many local levels, we have seen elections producing stunning results, as in 2023, when, laborers were winning election into House of Rep, when governors were stopped from going to Senate, about 6 of them, and when unknown parties, like in Nasarawa, will win 2 Senate seats. But the larger story of our democracy is that public perception is not very good. It's not positive. There are fears that this democracy is about passing the motion, and that we need to secure this democracy, and live a better life. So that is the problem with this democracy. And I think that if it is about democracy and development, yes, we need it, and the link is there, but the link is not automatic. Because you have good election doesn't translate into, effective governance or development. And as I've always argued, there are usually intervening variables between a good election and the possibility of having development in return. One of them is that a democracy that is functional has to be underpinned by strong institutions. And in strong institutions include the legislature. A legislature that is in the position to hold the executive, to account. Because in the design of our presidential system, the legislature is a veritable instrument of horizontal accountability. You need a judiciary that is strong and independent. I'm sure you know the state of the legislature and the judiciary today. They are subjects of lamentation on the streets and in beer parlors. But more important also, you need a strong civil society that can play the role of a watchdog, and yet it is possible that you can have a democracy where the institutions are strong, or where you have strong civil society, and the key players don't even believe in democratic values, because at the end of the day, democratic values and, has to dwell in the hearts and minds of people who govern, the key actors. I don't need to talk about the fact that we don't even have political parties. In fact, there's a book that I read and I don't forget, the book by Tim Carothers about political parties as the weak link in our democracy. We don't have parties. So there's a section of the book where Tim Carothers talks about the standard lamentations about political parties. And one of the points he makes is that political parties are not what they used to be. This is not the golden age of political parties. If in the US, Trump becomes the Republican Party, and the Republican Party is Trump, then you can see the institutional disasters that have attended to political parties. In this country, political parties are not even policy platforms. You can't distinguish one from the other. The Nigerian Constitution tells political parties to derive their manifestos from Chapter 2 of the Constitution. They hardly do that. And what they implement is different from what they say they represent. So that is where we are. Then I go to the second segment of my presentation where I want to talk about national security. And to make my point very easy, I try to juxtapose the two competing concepts of national security and human security. And I return to my original points, that for a very long time, we had a flawed understanding of what is national security. Probably as a hangover of the post-Cold War era, when the security of a nation state was understood in terms of how to defend its territory against other countries, particularly in the context of the raging ideological conflict between the East and the West. We tended to believe that to secure a country, all you need is to develop a sophisticated military and then procure the most expensive hardware that can put your enemy at bay. We did that. Then the third wave of democracy came, and we all were part of it. And even when we had embraced democracy, we didn't review many things, including, what gives you national security. We continue to think that national security equals the security of the governing elites, equals the security of the nation physically from its borders. And we therefore abandoned the fact that what promotes national security for a country is not this conception of national security in terms of the strategic doctrine of the armed forces and so on. No, rather, it is human security. Because what we have done is to abandon development. And yet, development is common sense. So common that it's about harvesting the priority needs of the people and doing them. I think it's something that we need to think about. So I'm not saying that military power is not important to national security. Indeed, it is very important. But it is military power plus human security. And that is where we need to return to. I think the major problem we've had is not to think about non-military elements for a long time. And the consequences are very obvious. The first one is a tendency to problematize national security as a military problem that requires increased defense expenditure for procurement of sophisticated military hardware and the modernization of the armed forces, the police, and other agencies. The second one is a tendency to give primacy to external threats at the expense of domestic, economic, social, and political arrangements for the advancement of the collective welfare of the citizens. So the major point I'd like to make, therefore, is that we need to return to promoting human security. And if that is what we are doing, we'll be basically focusing on how we can take our people away from freedom from fear and freedom from want. And the UNDP literature on this is very clear, that for you to promote human security, you must have a people-centered understanding of development. You must center on the human being as a basic constituent element, And in fact, the way they have broadened the idea, they say the idea of human security encompasses community, economic, food, environmental health, personal and political security. So we need to go beyond the security of the nation to security of the socioeconomic aggregates, the different social groups that inhabit the nation state. So that is the whole idea of human security, and we need to return to that. If I'm to go through this, I will go talking copiously about Kofi Annan and the likes of Gambari in terms of what they have said about human security and the fact that ours is a big tragedy. And the worst thing about the indices of lack of progress is that sometimes they take ethnic and regional terms. If you look at poverty indices, yes, at the general level, Nigeria has become the poverty capital. But if you look at the variation in terms of poverty level between the Northwest, which has been scoring #1 consistently, in terms of level of poverty, then the Northwest, you could see clearly that there are regional differences, So there's unevenness across different ethnic homelands in terms of access to development opportunities, And I think I wouldn't go beyond here because my 45 minutes is sacrosanct. Now, let me quickly talk about what is it that we can do. What is very good, the good news for Nigeria, is that Nigerians say they like democracy. They prefer democracy as the method of accessing power. They prefer the ballot to the bullet. And if you read through all the Afrobarometer survey about attitude of Nigerians to democracy, very positive. But at the same time, they are not happy that this democracy hasn't produced tangible benefits to the people, particularly to the majority of the people. So the question to then pose is, what do we need to do to reinvigorate and renew our democracy so that it can better serve the needs of the people? So if we say democracy is a new game in town, it means then that we are happy that we elect our leaders, but what are the chances that we have to subject them to control, to accountability, to do our bidding, to stop corruption, to stop human rights violation? What do we need to do? How can elected leader provide the dividends? And what the people want, very simple, a basket of things that range from employment, poverty eradication, wealth creation, social policy for citizens' welfare, and so respect for the rights of the population, empowerment of women, creation of opportunities for self-actualization by the youth. These are the simple things. They are not things that you need to do with the same sophistication like flying to the moon. They are very simple things, And I think we can do a lot. One of the things I think this country can do, because we are discussing democracy, we go back to the importance of institutions. And the institutions don't function. They fail. The legislature does not function. It's even worse at state level, where governors are too powerful and don't even want financial autonomy for the state assembly. It's terrible, In all the attempts to reform the constitution, governors tell speakers of legislative houses, if you vote in favor of financial autonomy for the house, you are gone. Those who try to vote for it lost their position. That is how bad it can be. We need political parties that are policy platforms. One of the lamentations about political parties in Africa, and Nigeria in particular, is they are not institutionalized. They are simply ethnic networks of people, and they are not united by common understanding of what to do in the public space when they win power. And in fact, the way Claude Ake puts it, he said for these elites, they need political parties as vehicles to win. And when they win, they don't do more than projecting power, in order, to massage their ego and so on. But to use power to promote development, is at the backstage. We are doing market reform. Market reform is very good. Coming from a society where we had a developmental state that didn't work, But remember, in many places now, the clamor is to bring back the developmental state. Coming from a background where we had a state that was inserted into the development process, but undermined by corruption and other misdeeds of the ruling elite, we have reason to think of a reform. But if you have to reform, you need strong social safety nets, particularly that will not allow the poor to fall below a particular level. So many of the people that are taking arms to fight, including attacking people they think belong to other religion, other ethnicities, are people that technically are disconnected from the states. The late Bala Takaya says those people live in the Republic of the Neglected because they don't have hope even about tomorrow. You know, so they take up arms to fight the state, to challenge the legitimacy of the state. And the more we do market reform without safety nets, you are further disconnecting citizens. You are further disconnecting citizens because the state is about the people. If you take the state, that is the common glue that will, bind people to the state. You can't have a nation-state project when the level of social inequality is on the rise. People will fall back on those identities that give them security. More often than not, their identities are in conflict with the project of the nation-state. So we need to think through what we are doing. But there is even a very big argument about this country. This country, by design, is not a radical capitalist market society. What they are forcing down on our throat is contrary to the design of the Nigerian state. The Nigerian state is a social welfare democratic state. Check chapter 2 of our constitution and what it tells us as a basic function of the state and what government must do to take control of the commanding heights of the economy and what government should do in health, education, housing. Check. By the nature of that chapter 2, this society is not structured, or is not about radical market reform that makes citizens fall off. I think we need to do this. And I have carefully read the manifesto of the ruling APC. I'm telling you, read that manifesto. Well crafted. It's as if it is lifted from chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution. But I think the problem is that we are going in opposite direction in terms of implementing policies. Check the chapter 2. Check APC manifesto. So I think this is something we need, but I think we need to stimulate governance at local levels. There are problems about governance at national level, but it's worse at subnational level. Only a few states you can refer to as pockets of governance effectiveness. After all the governors are in Abuja. They don't even stay in their states. They don't stay, And anytime I know one particular governor, they are taking picture with the governor, with the president. Even if the place is crowded, he makes sure that his head appears for people to see. He doesn't stay in his own state, There's a problem about governance, and they won't allow state assemblies to even be financially autonomous. We need to do local governance. We need more than functional local government. The local government system, as it is good. And if you go back to the 1976 local government reform, the 3 core objectives identified for local government still remain relevant. But the way local governments are functioning today, the chairmen are actually errand boys of the governor. So when the money comes, even when the president made a very courageous announcement in support of local government reform, it has remained only on paper. I was telling somebody that one local government in Kogi, The last time I knew about the person who is the current chairman, he stole a goat in the village and ran away. When he came back, he became chairman. It tells you about the quality of governance at that level. I think we need to do something about that. And in fact, we should do local governance. When I was in UNDP, we piloted local governance in the Niger Delta. Beautiful results. We set up a common fund. Local government and state government were contributing. And it was run by communities who selected their own leaders to identify their projects. It produced stunning results. We should go beyond local government to local governance. And I think if we have to make progress, we need to address the weakened capacity of our public service institutions. I work in an organization where people at the level of assistant director and director cannot write constructive memoranda or memorandum. They can't take minutes. There's something wrong. The Indian public service is probably the best in the world. And for you to be recruited in the first place, your performance in your degree, exam must be above board. But here, there are all kinds of things that go into our recruitment. In the next 5 minutes, I'll finish. What I'll do is to simply talk about the need to refederalize this country. It's a big issue. Issue of federalism is very important. I think it was Babangida who said that federalism belongs to what he calls the doctrine of Nigeria's settled issues. Right from colonial rule, all the nationalists, the Awolowo, the Zik, and so on, all of them converged around the ideology of federalism, around the ideology of promoting shared rule and home rule, around the ideology of maintaining one national identity, but allow local people to have some level of autonomy so that they can attend to their differences. And it worked well until the erosion of constitutional federalism when the military intervened in politics. Today, we have a federal constitution and a system that is federal in name, but in practice is unitary. The 69 legislative items on the exclusive list, many of them belong to states. Some even belong to local government. We need to re-engineer our federal system so that federalism can effectively combine shared rule and home rule. And this is a challenge that we need to address. And if this paper is given, you will see how I try to, explain one or two things that we need to do in order to properly refederalize. My problem is not that you have unity when everybody agrees. Yes, a nation state of different ethnicities is also a nation state of different ideas. So different ideas, people have different ideas, but it's how to ensure that these different ideas can coexist. Ben Anderson reminds us that a nation is an imagined community. We need to imagine that we are one. In fact, it says even in one village or in one town, you don't know everybody, but you have a feeling of common identity. That is what we need, in order to promote that consciousness. And the values that can promote this consciousness are values of equity. They are values of justice. They are values of giving everybody opportunity and understanding different cultural identities and allowing them to express themselves. The building block of unity is differences. Countries that have succeeded is not by suppressing differences, but by allowing differences to flower and allowing those principles and values that will make us feel like one to reign instead of, pushing it the hard way. And I think this is something that we need to do not because there is such a thing as true federalism. We have very useful proposals about what to do. And you can actually, remove a lot of those items, give them to the states, increase their revenue to be able to do with an open governance. If you don't open up governance, we will not be able to deal with the challenges that trouble our sense of common identity. The last one is this country is also not democratic. I mean, it's not only democratic, it is not only federal, it also agrees to practice what in the literature is called consociational democracy. The recognition that different parts of the country are at different levels of development, and the need for you to implement some policies of reverse discrimination. That is very clear in the Constitution of 1979 and that of 1999, basically the promotion of the federal character principle. The only problem we've had in our country is that in trying to make federal character work or operationalize it, the Constitution says every state should produce a minister. Then it says that, however, to be a minister from a state, you must belong to an ethnic group indigenous to that state. And the notion of indigeneity was smuggled in. The problem with Nigeria is that every solution becomes the new source of problem. So, indigeneity became those who can prove that historically they were here before others. What do you do about many local communities where there are three groups, none of which can prove that it arrives before others? And there are many of them. The Ibira and the Basa in Nasarawa Toto have problem because the testimonies and the oral histories they provide cannot prove that this one was here before the other. But that is not the problem. You remember that in 1976, Bala Usman and Segun Oshoba actually wrote a minority position on the 1979, from the report from the Constitutional Assembly, where they disagreed with the biological definition of citizenship. I said, no, you are going to cause problem. Look at Jos. Look at everywhere. Look at Ife. Look at Modakeke. We need a common sense of citizenship. But we need also to faithfully implement the federal character provisions. The problem with the federal character provision is that if there's a big man from an ethnic group representing a state at the national level, 50% of people employed from that state come from his ethnic group, even when the state is multiple in terms of ethnic identities. I think we need the Federal Character Commission needs to be strengthened, and it requires civil society oversight. Yes, people have criticized it, that it's about, what do they call it, tribal, equity. Yes, there are problems with the implementation, but we need to implement that. And I think what this country really needs is a kind of equal opportunity commission that is not only about differences that are territorially distributed, but differences that reflect gender and other forms of identities. Thank you, Chair.
I think the Prof desires another round of applause. This is the icing on the cake. All of you are going back to your offices as rebranded. You are now going to be new agents of change to change and re-engineer governance in the country as a whole. Thank you once more, Professor Sam Egu, for the presentation. We did not expect less than what we got. At this stage, I'll invite the Acting Director of Research, Professor Musa Emmanuel Umar, MNI, to make a presentation to the distinguished guest lecturer. Okay, there's an instruction from the DG. The participants are allowed to make 1 or 2 questions that are really, really very important and straight to the lecture delivered. Please.
I think we need to clap again for the professor. Thank you very much. We just have a slight adjustment to the program. We have listened to a very, very interesting lecture, and I'm sure that the lecture instigated a whole lot of things. So I said we should allow our participants to ask a few questions before they go, because we are going to unleash you on the society, and we want to be sure you have the right frame of mind. Now, before you do that, I took some notes, and I want to just mention those things, not to guide your thoughts, but just to remind us of some of the salient things Prof mentioned. I didn't get all of them, though. Prof kind of questioned whether we actually need democracy, because he was looking at the essence of governance as being effective governance, and he spoke about functionality. So he was querying whether if democracy was not effective, then do we actually need democracy? So we need to ask Prof what we need if we do not need democracy. Prof asked if you have strong political parties. I don't need to talk about that. And then he was able to make a link between national security and human security. He made a very, very good point on that. He raised the issue of disconnected individuals. He said perhaps most of those who engage in banditry are those who feel disconnected from society. And of course, he mentioned that we must fight social inequality. And finally, he queried this, not query like that, but he raised issues concerning what we currently practice and the Chapter 2 of the Constitution. For me, that is a big challenge, because where you are trying to do market reforms and you do not basically have a capitalistic society, then there will be a conflict between having a social, a liberal society where the welfare of the people is uppermost in the minds of the state. I know for sure that in America, they have capitalistic structure, and so when you carry out market reforms, you expect those capitalistic structures to take care of the market reforms. But where at the heart of your core democratic values is social welfareism, then that will certainly conflict with the core content of capitalism. Those were some of the issues Prof raised. Because I want to check the quality of the understanding of participants, we are going to take 2 questions, and please, if you do not have the quality of question that will make the DG happy, please do not try to waste the 2 slots we have. I'm not trying to put us down, but be sure that your questions will challenge the lecturer. He is a professor of many years, and he has been a scholar in the area of democratic governance for so many years. So let us give him very challenging questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Your name and your question. Straightforward.
My name, I am Ome Mwapokwe, a participant sponsored by the head of the Civil Service of the Federation. Sir, my question goes thus. What are your projections and prognosis on Nigeria's political security future, going by the widening gulf, the deepening alienation, and the broadening disconnect between governance and the people? Do you foresee a future that is better than the present, or do you foresee a future that we would still be grappling with worse situations? What are your thoughts, Professor? Thank you.
Thank you. Prof, would you like to take all the three questions or one at a time? Okay. I have instructions that one of the questions must be asked by a lady participant. So, Mr. Allo. So the ladies, please, after Mr. Allo, please. Go on.
I am David Ifani Allo, a participant sponsored by the presidency. Sir, you said that by the Afro-Biometric Survey done, that Nigerians are in support of democracy. I want to interrogate that statement. Is it a case of Nigerians supporting democracy because they don't have an option? Or have we really interrogated it if truly democracy is what we need as Nigerians? Because it appears to serve only the elites alone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The lady participant? Okay. Please, let her have the microphone. Thank you.
I am Amina Saluhu, a participant sponsored by the presidency. Distinguished lecturer, sir, you have very rightly asserted that there must be a connection between democracy and development. And at the center of that is the people. But a lot of the time, when we also have discourses around the nature of the state, we look at the formal institutions of the state that are clearly recognized. You talked about the legislature, for instance, the judiciary. I would like to hear your thoughts, sir, in terms of the location of the quote and unquote informal institutions of the state. For instance, the location of the traditional institutions, the location of community-based organizations, and how exactly you think they should engage the state and the state should engage with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Prof.
Back to his height. Okay, I think the easiest one is the Afro-Barometer thing. Afro-Barometer, it's not my company. Afro-Barometer is interested, does a lot of work around democracy and the deepening of democracy in Africa. So they do a lot of survey across democracies to know how people feel. So I'm reporting, what the report of their survey over the years, suggests that, look, we are happy, we want a democracy. We don't want military rule. And we want the ballot to continue to define how people get to power. But we have a problem with this democracy. It is not attending to our priority needs. The policies are not helpful, but we want, so that is a fact as it exists that I'm reporting. Okay? I'm not sure they ask people under duress, and they do this survey not only for Nigeria, for so many African countries, and the results are not the same in terms of what people are saying. Now, let me go to the first one about my projection, what I see in the future, which is very difficult. But I think one of the first things I want to say is that I noted in my presentation that the new dimension to what we are witnessing is that some of these people are doing it for profit purpose. So you have kidnapping, the rustling, all those things are not just anger against the state per se, but there are people who are actually making big profits. So crime has become part and parcel of the values of money in our society. But for me, there's nothing to suggest that even as Nigeria is today, it may not exist tomorrow. I don't think that is part of my fear. Because in this country, even when we talk about people talking about North, about South, about Yoruba, about Igbo, and this political ethnicity is not real. I keep telling people. It's not real. Because people act more across ethnic and religious lines when it matters most for them. A lot of people, when they are in want and they want somebody to give them money so that nobody will know, they will go to a person from the other religious group so that the story is kept quiet. So in terms of how we live on a daily basis, honestly, we build solidarity across these divides. And that's why you must make a difference between politicized ethnicity, the one that leads to conflict and violence, and the way we live on a daily basis. You know? So for me, it doesn't suggest that Nigerians are divided against themselves. Because in reality, that is not who we are. But more importantly, why can't we? If there is, look, we know people who are fighting insurgents, who tell us that they get to a point where they have insurgents at their disposal to waste. Their commanders tell them to pull back. What does that tell you? Is that about state capacity? It's not. Because the evidence we are hearing is that even those who are in high position sponsor violence. What does that tell you about the nature of this ruling elite? That one of our friends describes as a homicidal ruling elite. Everything they do, they don't even have a long-term sense of, and I think we need to put pressure. Put pressure. If there is political will, we can overcome insurgency. But we need governance. We need equity. We need to reduce social inequality. If we do those things, I am not sure that anything will threaten the viability of the Nigerian state. So, and in any case, it's even more difficult to separate than to remain in bad marriage. You know, I'm sure Nigerians know this very well. So, Amina, you know, the way I understand it, right from the construction of the Nigerian state under colonial rule, traditional institutions were part of the state structures. In fact, for colonial rule to survive and maximize the intentions. When I read the Gazetteers of Northern Nigeria, and I understood that as far back as 1989, the British formed the Hausa Association in London, devoted to the study of Hausa language and orthography. And then they came out with a conclusion that, look, this Hausa language and people will be the base on which we are going to rule our colony. Because they argue that in Hausa language, power can be best communicated. So when Lugard came to the north, and started forging indirect role and putting emirs as part of the structures, to enhance production of cotton and what have you for exports. In fact, the colonial state actually integrated, traditional institutions into state structures. But because they were not sure of what they saw in the north, they thought they could go to the west with the same degree, and they didn't know that the Obas were not as powerful as the emirs. And it was a colossal waste or failure in the east, where, for example, they decided to do with those who were not even needed in society, the outcasts and those society had neglected. But my point today is that the traditional institutions have lost their traditional essence. I don't think so. I don't think they were used that kind of legitimacy. That's why they can't even settle local quarrel. They'll become part of the political, machine of domination. So maybe the only thing you want to give them is a role that is written in the Constitution. These are your roles. But they are politicians par excellence, and they are part of the state structures as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. The DG has graciously allowed me to invite Navy Captain Giginia to ask a question before we close the session. Rapporteur General of SEC 47-2025. Please. Good.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm Captain A. Gigia, a participant sponsored by the Navy. Sir, my question is this. From the beginning of your lecture to the end of your lecture, there is this tension that you have been speaking to, which is the Nigeria's origin story. From what I understood of your lecture, I can summarize everything that you have said. The core of the problem that we are having lies with the way we see Nigeria's origin story. We view it as we are victims that have been brought together, and we fail to take ownership of that story and come up with a common national myth or unifying story which will enable us to forge forward. So I want to hear your thought about this. Thank you, sir.
Okay. The nation-state project has a very long history. The modern nation-state, as sanctioned by the Treaty of Westphalia, 1644, was an European thing. And in Europe, when the idea of nation-state came, it was associated with ethnic homogeneity. The French having their nation, the Germans having their nation, the Italians, and so on. It was close to... Those that are not as homogeneous today are those that have absorbed people from their colonies, the French, and so on. And that's why multiculturalism is a reality for them today. But that's not the original design of the nation-state in Europe. Now, coming to post-colonial societies, including Nigeria, the British conquered a huge territory made up of many ethnicities. Therefore, you are fated with a situation in which many multiple identities have to coexist together. And that is where what we call the national question has, is a big issue of discussion. How do you weld these different identities and groups to have one common sense of identity? It is not an easy thing. The British itself did not even help matters, because all that it did was how to ensure that one ethnic group remained distant from another. In colonial cities like Kano, they didn't allow different ethnicities to mix. Southerners they insisted they can't mix with Hausa or those who are the original. I mean, they did all this. They did that in Zaria City. They did that everywhere in Jos, ethnic segmentation, divide and rule, you know. And even, you know, in the course of decolonization, you could see clearly how the British were not even interested in the development of a common voice about. So that is the reality. So the fact that we are different ethnicities does not mean that we can't become a nation. And that is my point. The fact that you have different, and that is why our society has developed different mechanisms apart from democracy. We say we'll be federal from the very beginning. We knew. That's why all the founding fathers of Nigeria were united about federalism. It's a big ideology that binds them together. But what have we done to federalism? It's eroded. And that's why people are clamoring. Revive your federalism. Refederalize. And I said it's not about true federalism, but federalism can be given a chance to work in this country by tinkering with the power arrangement in the Constitution and matching it with appropriate deployment of resources. I wouldn't be, and that's why I say also, even these differences you are seeing, you know, they don't, for me, that is not the issue. Beyond the differences are also underlying unity among people. They do their things, you know, regardless of the religious and ethnic divide. So my point is that we can have unity in this country. The most successful nations are multi-ethnic. Building national identity is like building a house. You require carpenters. You require masons. You require, you know, all kinds of skills who work together. We can develop a common sense of unity in this country, regardless of our ethnic and cultural differences. And it's a project, and it's a project. A project is a project. Those who rule must take it as a project. Tell me, many of the people I went to universities with went to Government College Sokoto, went to Government College Warri. Today, all those unity institutions are not working. Tell me what you are doing. If you look at admission figure into universities, they reflect the local population. To the extent that if you come from another state, you can't even win president of departmental association. So where is the unity project? Even people say dismantle NYSC. This country. I mean, I think we are very terrible people. Thank you. Honestly, all those things for unity, you dismantle them. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Prof. Before we take the vote of thanks, may I kindly request the DG to present the Distinguished Annual Lecture plaque to the distinguished lecturer, please. Thank you very much, DG. Finally, let me invite the Acting Director of Research, Professor Musa Emmanuel Umar, MNI, to make the vote of thanks.
I just took permission from the distinguished honor lecturer to raise the mic a little. The Director General, our 2025 distinguished honor lecturer, the Director of Studies, Institute Librarian, the spouse of the Director General, former Director of Research, members of the faculty, distinguished participants of Senior Executive Course 47, good afternoon. Let me start by saying that we are privileged, or the Senior Executive Course 47 are privileged to have Professor Sam Egu as the distinguished annual lecturer for this year. And in the tradition of distinguished annual lecture, questions are not asked, but I'm happy that the DG decided that let's ask questions so that your minds are clarified, because by tomorrow, by the grace of God, we'll be released into the society. So I hope you are not bribing the DG. I'm not sure, the US, make sure that your name appears. The Director General wants to sincerely, on behalf of the Director of Research, appreciate you for supporting the Directorate to organize this distinguished annual lecture. We are most sincerely grateful for even agreeing for us to invite Professor Sam Egu. Thank you very much, sir. And also appreciate all the management members, Director of Studies, Institute Librarian. Thank you very much for always supporting the DG. Let me also appreciate the spouse of the DG. She's always supporting us. She's always with the DG, every event. Even when DG is not there, she will make sure she's there. We appreciate you, man. Thank you very much. Let me appreciate Professor Sam Egu for accepting to be our lecturer for this year within a short notice. It will surprise you to know that we informed him on Monday, and he accepted to be here. He's been a friend of the National Institute. He's always very supportive to the National Institute. And for the DG, sir, in case, I'm sure maybe I didn't mention to you, but he was instrumental to setting up the Political Party Leadership and Policy Development Center in NIPS, where he was with the UNDP. Him in particular and Professor Jibrin Ibrahim, they play a very key role to ensure that we have the center with the support of the UNDP. Thank you very much, Prof, for being here today. And also to mention, he was my internal examiner during my PhD defense. And Prof. Shah was my supervisor. So, and funny enough, they were all classmates. They graduated from ABU in the same class, political science. Thank you very much, sir. We want to sincerely also appreciate Prof. Shah. This week is University of Jos convocation, and today they are having their annual, graduation lecture, but he chose to be here, being part of the family of the National Institute. Thank you for coming. Let me appreciate all the faculty members, the director staff, the senior fellows for gracing this occasion and all your efforts, particularly for the successful Pali 2 days ago. Thank you very much. The staff of the National Institute that are here, thank you very much for standing with us. And especially let me appreciate the Distinguished Annual Lecture Committee headed by Dr. Solomon Gushibet and his members. Thank you for putting this together. We appreciate you, we appreciate you sincerely. In case you don't know, there are people who have joined us online. We want to appreciate you for joining us online. Thank you very much. We are grateful. And of course, the Senior Executive Course 47, this is all your show. If you are not here, we didn't have this show. So I want to say thank you very much for actively participating in this work. Thank you, Protocol. Thank you, ICT. Thank you, all the staff. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Professor Umar. Participants, 24 hours in NIPS may be 48 hours. All right. Item 7 is served, but the venue will be announced when the DG and the dignitaries leave the high table. Please, the MG, could you please, okay. There is a commissioning ceremony for the participants project. immediately after the closing of the ceremony. Okay, the stand is outside, please, just at the entrance to the hall, to the left. Is that clear, please? Thank you. All right, we'll take the national anthem now before we proceed, please. And we stand. Okay, the participants should please proceed to the project site quickly, very quickly, before. Please hurry up.